Welcome to Politaria. So, Politaria is a social experiment I run on Discord where I split players up into three nations with completely different political systems and parties. The goal? To see whether real life theories on international relations are accurate. Will they act as the theory says they will, or will they defy all odds and act in a complete different way? Stay to find out. Now, let me just introduce the countries that the players will be playing in. First up, we got the Genovian Republic in the west, and in the north, we have the Federal States of Sardinia, which is 100% not inspired by the United States of America, and in the east, we have the authoritarian Valorians, or the Unitary State of Valoria. These guys are basically inspired from every kind of dictatorial regime you've seen throughout history. Now, before I go too deep into how the simulation works, I think it's important we need to see the framework, aka the theories. So, at the heart of the simulation, there are three theories we'll be testing them on primarily. There are other theories we can view from this, but these are the three I'll be focusing on. I might, mention some other theories if it ever gets brought up. So, now before I dive into those theories, I want to just mention that all players in this simulation have zero idea what theories are being monitored for. The only idea they know is this is a social experiment and there are three theories they're being monitored for. So, now onto the theories, we will test them. First up, realism. So this theory says that every nation will always act in their self-interest. Will we see that happen? Will every country in this simulation act in their self-interest with their governments? Or will they actually act together and, end up being friends or whatever else they want to do? Second theory, or more of an effect, is the rally around the flag effect. So this effect says when a crisis hits, like 9/11 or other crises, where a lot of innocent lives die, that opposition parties and people tend to support the government more. So it's more of like a small term popularity. Now, for this theory to work out in our simulation, we would have to see opposition parties end up uniting with the government and supporting them in all ways possible. Now, I don't expect this to happen all the time, but if we do see this happen, it confirms that the rally around the flag effect is the real effect. Now, it already is a real effect, but we'll put this to a test ourselves. And the third and final theory is game theory, which is basically how these countries will interact with each other. And that's pretty much it. Now, with the theories out of the way, let's get right back into the simulation. Up first, we got Genovia. Genovia is a parliamentary democracy, and if you don't know what that means, it just means that the prime minister leads them. So basically, if the biggest coalition manages to gain a majority of seats, then the coalition will be able to have their selected prime minister candidate be the prime minister and lead the country. And next up we got Sardinia. Sardinia is a presidential democracy where the president leads them, if the name doesn't already state it. And finally we got Valoria, where the supreme chancellor will lead them. As one real quick thing I want to say, players in the game were allowed to guess what theory they're being tested on, and if they got it correctly, they would be rewarded. So this incentivized players to try getting as much as information as possible from what I'm giving them. I didn't give them much, to be honest. I just said this is a social experiment, have fun. Some players did manage to guess it, so we'll get to that later on. So starting off in the game, I gathered up players and the community grew very quickly. I mean, Jesus, a lot of people were very interested in the simulation. And so we began. Players already started DMing me, asking me some questions. For example, this player gives me a step-by-step guide, I suppose, to how the Supreme Chancellor could just take over the country. So I had to go back to the Constitution and make some changes. So basically, this is what the article about Chancellor says. Oversees national security and declares national emergencies where they may limit the basic laws. The basic laws is the Constitution. And as you can see, there's already some problems with this. So I had to add this article. So I had to add section 8, which says emergency powers must be granted by a 67% vote in the council, and the council must convene every 4 days to vote on it. During this time, members of the council cannot be arrested or detained. So this managed to fix it a little bit, because I didn't want. I know I want Valoria to be like some kind of dictatorial regime or authoritarian at least, but I don't want them to be snuffed out on the first day. I gotta have some fun in it. So yeah, after that, I just basically started observing what the players started saying, and I mean, we had some questionable players. I mean, I'm just wondering whose playbook Frederick Forn is playing by. I mean, it's not like someone in history has done that before, you know what I mean? Definitely not. And these guys are gonna try annihilating democracy. I'm sure this is just, talk, and they have concepts of a plan and they're not actually gonna carry through with it, you know what I mean? But anyways, we got many more people discussing their plans, some actually good. For example, George here, who's a part of the Progressive Party in Armenia, asked, "Hey guys, who wants to be president?" And they began discussion through that. Or like the Liberal Party in Genovia, who began discussing their policies like taxing the rich and what's the big issue here. So that's the type of stuff. I mean, I'm not sure why the National Unity Party in Valoria decides they want to just kill everyone, but hey, we do not judge here. We just listen. Now let's head back into Valoria so we can look at the parties more. As I believe Valoria is the most interesting part here. I mean, other parts are interesting as well, but their players are planning a little bit more with their authoritarian system. So, remember this guy. He's the guy who basically showed me the huge flaw in the constitution of Valoria. So this guy has two plans. If the National Unity Party, which is the anti-democratic party, does not switch the country into democracy, he will attempt to overthrow the National Unity Party using military force and then establish a constitution. So the party he's a part of is the Democratic Front, which believes in democracy and wants to establish a new constitution, a fairer constitution. And that's his game plan here. In their chat, they basically scream for democracy and all that. Now, some people were already knew when the elections were going to happen, but then there are some people like the official KGB officer who, for some reason, did not know when the election was happening. But that's completely fine. We do not judge here. So, now with the elections about to happen, people were eager. They already were making plans, some very undemocratic and some democratic. One of these plans was with the Democratic Front in Valoria. Now, in Valoria, the Democratic Front had some issues, particularly with some members and stuff. One member said something like, let's bomb something. And of course, as we can see, Dr. Lugo, I am not going to try to pronounce the last name, but Dr. Lugo and another person decided to leave the party, joining with the Labour Party, who at that time did not seem like they were going to win at all. Also, there also came a period of me where I fell asleep for way too long, and then people started thinking I was dead for some reason. But I can assure you I am alive. I am not from Los Angeles though. But anyways, despite that happening, the elections for Armenia for the president happened. Now on the right we had Fredrickson, and on the left we have Lee, both of them vying for the presidency. Who would get elected? Well, let's see the promises. On the right, Fredrickson promised mandatory military service, wants to ban jihadists. I have no idea who he's talking about, but probably Muslims, so yeah. And communists from the whole country, I suppose. His whole secret plan is he's gonna somehow curve democracy and remove them from power or whatever. I'm sure Lee would win this, am I right? I mean, that's such obvious win. All he has to do is make some moderate promises and he'd obviously win. Now, according to my notes, this is what Lee promised. Nothing. And now let's move on to the election results. And before you think I'm joking, Lee did not post any manifesto. He did campaign, but he did not specify what he would do in office. What we can assume he would do is probably nothing. But let's get to the election results. And ladies and gentlemen, that wasn't even close. President Friedrich Forn won by 18%. But this is a moment for Lee. After this, Lee went out and he probably sat with a VP candidate. Also, quick note, the percentage there is completely wrong. I must have mistyped the 3 into 4, so please ignore that. His fellow candidate probably tried to console him, saying, "It's okay, we tried our best." But Lee knew he did not try his best. Now, any average man would probably go home, snuggle up with his wife, and cry. But Lee had no wife. But Lee was no man either. Lee was a menace. And therefore, Lee, right afterwards, did not quit, but he went to his party and he said, "I will crush those fascist motherfuckers." Now, this is the balls of a man, a menace, I'm telling you. Now, afterwards, he began to run for the House of Representatives, which is the legislative body of Armenia. And he began campaigning harder than your world has ever seen. I mean, this guy was campaigning like he was trying to avenge his dead wife. Or, dog, if you want. Now, let's skip over to Genovia. Genovia, let's see what you're offering us. And Genovia is asleep. Genovia didn't have much going on throughout the beginning. Let's hope that changes later on. But let's just see. Now, let's hop back to Armenia and let's see what the new president and vice president are planning. Now, here they were just drafting out, a nominations pick for secretaries and all that. And then there was a little bit of a weird moment that happened when deciding who's running for the House of Representatives. I'll just show you. So the vice president of Armenia decided to run for the House of Representatives. Now, any American who understands a little bit about the Constitution or their legal system will understand why this is not possible. Now, let me phrase the Constitution. Let me just show the Constitution for a second. Now, members of the House cannot be secretaries or president or vice president. If they are, they must resign from either one position and by-elections must be held. Now, any normal person reading this would think, okay, so you cannot be a president or vice president or secretary at the same time as a member of House. He did not think that. He says, it says a representative may not be vice president, but I am a vice president being a representative. Now, obviously, once he becomes a representative, he will be the representative and vice president. It's obviously very confusing, but in the end he said, you know what, no, I'm not gonna deal with this constitutional battle against everyone in the whole fucking server, and decided to withdraw. Now in the House, it ended up being a split from 3-3, so the Progressive had 3 and the National Front had 3. So this would make a very interesting coalition base where both of them had to agree on certain things to pass something. But we'll get back to them because they have some crazy stuff happening later on. And in Valoria, a scandal happened. So the scandal was basically where the National Unity Party were talking about making a secret police, killing labor members, and, just some stuff you don't want the people who are voting for you to know. But unfortunately it went out and that severely affected them, which gave Labour a clear majority. And in Genovia, Liberal Party won. Everyone saw this coming. But then the Prime Minister resigned due to personal issues. And then the Liberal Party had another thing, which led to a boycott, as you can see here. So basically he says the Conservative Alliance will be boycotting this debate because of the collapse of this Liberal government. And now the Liberal government was on a 2-day timer, which they already wasted a good day on election. Now they had 14 hours to get a government going. They had to pick out their government nominations, or a snap election would be called. Do you remember this guy? Yeah, he's the president of Armenia. And he just proposed a bill in the House to, a constitutional amendment. Now you just read it, right? You read. I'll read it with you. If for whatever reason the Speaker of the House cannot continue his duties or fails to do his duties, the Vice President shall act as Speaker for the remainder of the term unless voted out by the House. And then he added, shall be changed to the Vice President shall act as the Speaker of the House and conduct its day-to-day operations, as well as cast the tie-breaking vote in case of a tie on a vote. So now, when you read that, some players in the Progressive Party read only the first part and thought, they're not going to change it. But did not continue reading it and did not see the changes. And unfortunately, they passed this bill. And then afterwards, when the referendum came, they realized. And then it became a huge referendum where it was tied 50-50, and it was defeated because a tie on a referendum means it does not come into effect. There were protests prior to the amendment failing to pass, which then was met with well, here you see it. Now, I couldn't find the image, but eventually he does deploy the military. Well, he orders the army to crack down on it and shoot those who, stand in the way because a protest emerged due to the referendum. But then the prosecution, which is the independent judicial branch system that they have, basically did not like that and allowed the vice president to be impeached for violating the constitution. So now he has a very big target on his back. He's left himself vulnerable to impeachment and arrest. Since it's not like the United States where a vice president cannot be arrested, a vice president can be arrested, even the president can. But then right afterwards, he resigned. Now, Rio Semira Oke is now Supreme Chancellor of Valoria and had appointed her cabinet. Their whole goal was to amend the constitution and make it more democratic and all that. So they began working towards that. And Genovia, I'll find an image that best describes it. Alright, so this is the image that I would say best describes it. They have no prime minister, they might have a snap election and all that, but it's alright. It's all gonna be fine, I suppose. Not the typical Canadian also managed to guess one of the theories, which is realism, so he's also guaranteed once the next election. So now, where was I? Ah, yes. So with Genovia having no prime minister anymore, a new prime minister was appointed. But seeing as the new prime minister was not a member of parliament, and the constitution had a specific thing about members of parliament, and it says, a special election must take place within 2 days of the seat being vacant. So the speaker gets to hold a special election, decide who becomes the new MP to replace. And of course, the speaker, not being a member of the Prime Minister's party, chose someone from his own party. And this led to a huge issue which led to the Prime Minister dissolving the parliament and caused snap elections. So the old Prime Minister then resigned as well, and then a new party leader for the Liberal Party was chosen, and then finally this came up. A 3-3-2-1 situation, making the Greens the kingmakers, allowing them to decide who becomes Prime Minister, essentially. And after a very short discussion, the Greens decided to ally with the Conservative Alliance, forming the government. Now back to Ardinia. Ardinia, you see that one blue seat up there? Yeah, so the player who controlled that seat resigned, leaving that seat vacant. And according to the constitution, a by-election must be held to replace that seat. And a by-election was held, and the Conservative Union won. And the Conservative Union supported the current president. So they made it 4-2, giving the government, essentially the president, the ability to pass any law and constitution amendments that he wanted to. Because they need 66% and 4 is 66%. 4 is 66% out of 6. So the president quickly takes action, trying to appoint the leader of the Conservative Union as the vice president. And then he gets caught in a scandal. Well, actually, he gets caught in a lot of scandals where he tried to start a war so he could justify the military sending and all that shit. But this one, where he tried to make a secret police or state police force, got the attention, and Fu, one of his own members, decided to betray him. And this started some events where Fu was trying to start impeachment against him. And he needed evidence, and he gave in the evidence where they tried creating a secret police force. That leader Conservative also wants to join him because if the president is removed, he becomes VP. He becomes president, not VP. He is VP. So this allows a huge opportunity for the Conservative Union to become powerful. So the president is then brought to trial. And in this trial, he's accused of many, many things. I can't even recite them right now. But in the end, he's found guilty. At least of one of them, which is lying to the people. Now, this would be fine, but the prosecution added this charge the last second. This made the claim invalid, and you will see that the president pointed out, he's like, bro, You cannot just add a charge last second without justification or, letting me prepare for it. So the case gets thrown out, and then the prosecution just decides to give up because they were like, I'm not going to prosecute someone even though the presidential election is like a day away. Now, to finish up this term, there was some radioactive smoke happening because Genovia tried making a nuke but didn't have the money, so it exploded. Big story. The government decided to cover it up. And then it led to the radioactive smoke went towards Valoria, which then led to a kind of awkward thing where Genovian officials were just denying that it ever happened. I mean, this speaks for itself. Deny, deny, deny. So that's what happens. Then the elections happen again because 2 weeks in real life has passed, which is when every election happened, except for Genovia, since they kind of dissolved their parliament before anything. They're kind of a confusing little wreck. But in the end, that's how it proceeded. Now, this guy who leaked the president's very questionable statements ran for the president and got elected with his VP, Harry Roosevelt, who is a reporter, got elected. This was the first time two independents got elected. Now, they'd have a very harsh time getting their secretaries elected, but let's see what happens. And in the House, it's pretty divided, but the socialists who had 0 seats ended up getting 4 out of 9, which, put them in a very powerful position. And for the Valorians here, the Labour also lost some seats, just 1, to 10 seats, so now it was also kind of unsure who would lead. Now, this is a message for the people who played and watching this, because they do get to see this. I do want to say thank you very much. It is unfortunate the experiment was cut short. And to see whether you guys actually succeeded in your theories, we'd have to say it actually did. The theories all succeeded, and I'll show you examples of it. Ardinia and Valoria signed an anti-human trafficking treaty, which basically worked together on it. Ardinia and Genovia both signed a treaty where basically would make it easier to trade among them. And when it comes to rally around the flag effect, I do think it was performed a little bit, but I can't say it's a confirmed effect. It did work some here and there, but it wasn't at a full extent that I was hoping for. Now, another thing I do want to mention is game theory was also not that well used, but I do think it was confirmed due to countries did interact with each other, not as dynamically as I hoped. They didn't manage to set up any kind of international laws or anything, but they did manage to set up treaties, which I did find impressive. So, to all the players, thank you very much. I do hope you enjoyed the experiment. I had a DM come to me early on when it was starting up. Someone said, why are you doing this? And the simplest way to answer that is because I am interested in it. And I do hope you as players also had fun in it, as much as I did. It was always interesting to me to see how everyone had their own things going on. Now, I know some players did not manage to become president or prime minister or supreme chancellor, but I do think you guys still did enjoy it. At least I hope you guys enjoyed it. If not, then that'd be a real tragedy for me. Now, I know some players did accuse me of being biased, and I just want to say that it is completely untrue. Throughout the whole game, I showed no bias. I treated everyone with the equal amount of hate. So, no bias there. So, I guess to finish this video off, I just want to say maybe in the future we can get together again and do something like this. Just maybe. So yeah, have a great day.